This lady is about to be sentenced to death. Her name is Daisy, and she grew up in South Africa with 10 brothers and sisters. When she was 12 years old, she moved to Rhodesia to live with the father and 2 of her brothers. If you did not know, Rhodesia is now called Zimbabwe. 3 years later, she moved all the way back to Cape Town to attend the Good Hope Seminary School. She later returned to Rhodesia, but did not stay long, and soon moved to Natal to enroll at the Breria Nursing Home in Durban. On one of her holidays in Rhodesia, she met this guy, Bert Fuller. I couldn't find a picture of him, so I'm just gonna illustrate him like this. Daisy thought he was
adorable,
and he was like,
"How you doing?"
and they fell in love. Before long, he popped the question, and they got engaged. Now this is where the story gets sad. Suddenly, Bert contracted black water fever, and he died on the same day they were supposed to get married. Daisy was devastated, as you can imagine. She then received £100 he left her, which is about 18,000 US dollars in today's money. 18 months later, she got married to this guy, William Alfred Cowley. He was a plumber in Johannesburg. They had 5 kids, but unfortunately 4 died. Their first 2 kids were twins, and they died in infancy. Their third child died of an abscess on the liver, and their fourth suffered convulsions and bowel trouble and died at 15 months old. Really? How much more can this woman take? It's like death is just following her around. But in June of 1911, their last and only surviving son, Rhodes Cecil, was born. Now this is where the story gets dark. She not only lost her fiancé, but 4 of her children. And now she was about to lose another, but this time not of natural causes, but by her own hand. Early in the morning of 11 January 1923, William became very ill after taking some Epsom salts that Daisy prepared for him. She called the doctor, but he did not think it was serious and just prescribed a bromide mixture. But soon after he left, William's condition turned out for the worse. Daisy then called out to her neighbors.
Call the doctor. William is very sick.
By the time he arrived, William was in excruciating pain. He was foaming at the mouth, wind blew in his face, and screamed if anyone touched him, until he passed away. Now this doctor suspected strychnine poisoning and refused to sign the death certificate. The outcome of the post-mortem said he died of chronic nephritis and cerebral hemorrhage. I guess they did not test for poison, so Daisy received another payout of £1,795 from William's will, which is equivalent to 160,000 US dollars in today's money. Did she do this to cash in? I don't know. But let's move on. 3 years later, she got married again to this guy, Robert Sprout. And he was a plumber too, and 10 years her senior. About 19 months after they got married, Robert became violently ill, similar to William, but he luckily recovered, only to suffer another attack a few weeks later. After drinking a beer in the company of Daisy and Rhodes. I don't know if Rhodes was in on it, but Robert sadly passed away on 6 November 1927, and this time, no autopsy was performed. Daisy then received another payout for £4,000 from Robert's will and another £560 from his pension fund, which is about 445,000 US dollars in today's money. Remember, all this is allegedly because it was never proven. So in 1931, Daisy got married again to this guy, Sidney Clarence de Melker. And yes, you guessed it, he was also a plumber. She seemed to have a thing for plumbers. Did she look for them in a newspaper or local hangouts? This is just weird. But this time, she did not poison her husband. She poisoned her only surviving son, Rhodes. So she traveled to Germiston to obtain arsenic from a chemist and used the surname Sprout. She claimed it was to destroy a sick cat. Less than a week later, Rhodes fell seriously ill at work after drinking coffee from a flask his mother gave him. A fellow worker also became violently sick after taking a sip from the coffee. Luckily, he recovered a few days later, but Rhodes ultimately passed away in March of 1932. He was only 20 years old. This time, a post-mortem was done, and the cause of death was given as cerebral malaria. And again, they did not test for poison. Daisy's motive for unaliving her son is unclear, but the theory is that he demanded more from her than she could give, and he became a burden. The obvious answer is that he was a disappointment because she pampered him his whole life, and he did not show any appreciation in return. By now, Daisy's former brother-in-law, William Sprout, raised suspicions surrounding his brother's death, and in April 1932, the police finally obtained a court order to exhume the bodies of William, Robert, and Rhodes. Rhodes's body was unusually preserved, which is due to the presence of arsenic in large quantities. A MD was able to find traces of arsenic in Rhodes's body. William and Robert's bodies was largely decomposed, and they found traces of strychnine. Traces of arsenic was also found in the hair and fingernails of Rhodes's surviving colleague. The police finally had enough evidence to arrest Daisy, and a week later, she was taken into custody. By now, the media and everyone was talking about it, and the chemist recognized her.
This is Mrs. D.L. Sprout. She signed the poisons register.
So he called the police. They finally had a strong case and put her on trial for 3 counts of murder. The people were queuing to get a seat in the courtroom, and some even sold their place in the queue. The trial lasted 30 days, and the Crown was unable to prove conclusively that William and Robert died of strychnine poisoning. However, they could prove that Rhodes died of arsenic poisoning because there was traces of arsenic on the flask from the coffee, and the defense of suicide was ruled out. Daisy proclaimed her innocence to the very end, but that was not enough, and she was ultimately sentenced to death by hanging and became the first woman serial killer of South Africa. Here is William in real life, and here is Robert. Sidney was lucky, but his surname will always be linked to the serial killer, Daisy Melker.